Am I audible? Hello? Hello? Hello, hi. We will be starting the session in about the next, let's just say another 4 or 5 minutes. We're going to be waiting for a few more people to join. Once they are in, I think we should be able to start with the session. It is 5 p.m. I understand that, but I think we should be able to start in the next 4 or 5 minutes. I hope we have people over, because then more people, more fun is the way I look at it. And I'm just hoping that we have a few more people over. And I think we just wait for another 4 or 5 minutes and not more. So I really appreciate your patience if you're already here. And yeah, so I hope we can wait for another couple of minutes or so. I'll just sort of start in a bit. So give me some time. Start. Okay, yeah, hi. I believe it's already what 5:05, and so I think it's time for us to begin. So, just give me a minute. All right, yeah, hi. So, hello everyone. My name is Rohan, and you will know me maybe a little later, probably, and not at this point, of course. So, a very, very warm welcome to each and every one of you to today's session. When I say warm welcome, I'm sure I could have said a hot welcome to all of you because it's really hot outside, and I think it's mid-May, so you're expecting things to be really hot outside, but forgetting the scorching heat, I think since we've made time for this particular session, I'm sure that all of you've come here in order to sort of learn a few things, and my job will be to make sure that you're learning a few things by the end of the session. So there are a couple of things that I really want us to understand, and I think this is mutually something we can all agree on. Is that when I start the session, now that I'm sort of helping you understand what this session is all about, you could be doing two things. Number one, you could be the direct receiver and someone who benefits from this information. Also, you could be somebody who's sharing this information with someone else. So you could do the job of a messenger as well. This could help someone else get the benefit and not just you. So yeah, so you can just simply circulate this video or information that you wish to, if you wish to, that is. So just make sure you're spreading this word everywhere and just sort of making people understand if this is going to help you eventually, right? So today's session, let's just sort of start with it to begin with. I'm going to share the screen with you. Please make sure you respond if you can sort of see the screen, and let me know if you can see it clearly. All right, so can everybody see the screen? If you can see it, please give me a yes on the chat box. If you can quickly say a yes on the chat box, please. All right. Okay. Yeah. So I hope everyone can see the screen, and let's understand why we are here. Now that you see why we are here, basically this session overall, okay, is about giving you some idea on the IELTS reading section. Now, there are two reasons why we are doing this particular session. Number one, I think one thing we would like to do is understand the reading section maybe a little well. Of course, if you know the reading section already, nothing like it. But in case you're not, let's say, 100% sure about the reading section, maybe you'll know a little bit more today. That's one. The other thing is probably the challenges you will be facing during the reading section. So we should be able to sort of address a few problems, if not all of them today, given we have time constraint. But I would like to address some of the major concerns, of course, as I'm doing the session. And then another thing which probably I would like you guys to get out of the session is that by the end of it, all of you should be able to say, more or less, most of you should be able to say that I was able to get a few things today. And I think the reading section now for me is more of a doable section. I should be able to score well on the reading section. That's purely the motive of today's session, right? So I'm going to try to make things easy for you on the reading section, particularly on the IELTS reading section. So a quick overview of the reading section, particularly understanding what IELTS reading is all about. Well, in simple words, when you write the IELTS exam, you write this exam because you are trying to sort of, study somewhere abroad. And mostly the countries that you'd like to go to are native English countries. And you belong to Bharat, India, right? So coming from a Hindi land or call it a multilingual country like India, where English is not the native language, when you apply to a native English country, you're expected to showcase that you have the required amount of English language proficiency, right? So for those reasons, you would write, you'd like to sort of prepare for an exam like IELTS, write this exam, of course. And when you do that, you're able to sort of make it through to some country which is native English, right? So at the end of the day, this exam proves that we are proficient in the English language. But at the same time, I would like you to understand that when you're preparing for this exam, one of the things that I think you should have in your mind is do not believe that English language is alien. We have a lot of English speakers in this country. I presume, I can be wrong, but I think most of the times, all of us somehow have had English medium education. I think most of us have had. Even if you sort of had a mixture of English or any other language, sort of was probably the medium of communication or medium of instruction for you in school, still I believe English is not something that's alien to us. It is a part and parcel of our country. Somewhere we all have absorbed the English language to a great extent. So first, do not think that reading English, understanding English, or for that matter, knowing the language for me is a challenge. Of course, it's not. You can very easily do well on this particular section or on this particular exam, but keeping in mind that you have to have a mindset which is very, very clear that I am not preparing for a language that is totally alien to me, something that I'm definitely used to doing. Of course, we have to work hard on a few things, but I think that is only bound to happen when you prepare for any exam, right? So keep that in mind and just keep yourself focused and motivated. That should be the thing, right? Now, coming to the reading section, particularly very quickly, there are two kinds of IELTS exams that you consider, which is academic IELTS or general IELTS exam, right? Out of these two, of course, the purposes are very different. Now, considering you're writing the academic IELTS exam, then the reading section should have around 3 long passages, and you have 60 minutes to do 40 questions, which are divided into 3 long passages. And remember that if I were to look at the division of time here, I think I'd spend 20 minutes per passage. That will make it 3 into 20, which is 60 minutes overall. So we have to be very smart when it comes to dividing the time, in 60 minutes should be divided equally into 3 passages, right? When it comes to general reading, there's a slight difference there. You can see that there are 4 short passages, which are a little different from the kind of passages you would get in the academic reading. So that difference, and 1 long passage, of course, with around 40 questions in 60 minutes. The number of questions and the time remains more or less the same. I do not know exactly what exams you guys will be writing, but hoping that, whatever exam you write, whether it's IELTS academic or general, reading section particularly requires a certain kind of, thought process or approach. So I believe we need to prepare ourselves for that, right? So that's the motive, right? And let's sort of proceed further. And as I proceed further, okay, as I move on to the next slide, there are a couple of things I would like you to understand. And I hope you'll be able to sort of respond to this in case you wish to respond to it. Probably you can respond to it later if you have questions as well. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that when it comes to the reading section particularly, there are some challenges. And I spoke about, what these challenges could be, like in terms of what should be the way to read the passage and what should be the right way to solve questions. Reading passage is a different problem altogether, and solving question is a different problem. We'd like to address both together in some ways where we can sort of keep things intact and work it together. Okay, so that's basically the motive again. And as I said, so we're going to move further. And so in the reading section particularly, if I were to look at the kind of questions you'd come across normally, so some of the questions you will come across will be, let's say multiple choice questions, yes, no, not given kind of questions, true, false, not given kind of questions, summary, completion, basically blank kind of questions where you need to fill in something to complete, a list of headings kind of questions. So there are different kind of questions you can see on the screen, right? Now, what I have decided to do is, now I could have discussed each and every one of these question types and it would have been perfectly okay. But we need to look at, probably the main area where you might face more trouble or you're bound to have more problems. So my motive, okay, of entirely doing this session is to really narrow your focus onto something which actually is a problem. Okay, so we are looking primarily at 2 most challenging question types out of this entire list. So you see the list of question types on the screen. Out of these, I would like to pick 2 challenging question types and discuss those with you. Okay, so one of them is the true, false, not given kind of question that you see on the screen. The other is list of headings. So some of you would probably have trouble. I think most of you might have trouble. We don't know. We'd like to see how that works. But generally speaking, when it comes to IELTS reading, these are the two kinds of topics on which mostly people struggle. Okay. So keeping that in mind, let's look at how we can tackle these question types. Okay. So I'm going to move further. And as I'm going to discuss each of these question types, we will do some exercises together. I hope that keeps you hooked up. Make sure you're patient enough to stay till the end, because we'd like to take something out of this session. I'd like to make sure that we are able to sort of gather something from this. Okay, so number one, okay, moving further, one of the things that you should know about the reading section is in terms of its difficulty levels. I think people generally speaking have issues in saying, okay, maybe my reading section is not something I'm able to score very much on. Like I score on it, but not a lot. Like my score tends to not go beyond a point. Now that point can vary, of course, from person to person. But speaking in general, I think when it comes to the reading section, everyone says that the kind of score that I get is not something that I really have prepared for. I prepared much harder. I was working really hard on the reading section, but somehow I don't, I'm not able to do the job on the day. Or maybe even if I do a mock test, I somehow, flunk on it. I'm not able to really do well on it. I fail a lot of times. Now, these are the kind of problems. Okay. So mostly people say that the kind of band that I want on reading is not really what I'm getting. There's always that disparity and there's always that difference in score, right? But I think what we can do is understand why this is happening in the first place. Let's understand where the problem lies, because if there's a problem, there has to be a cause of the problem, right? So let's understand the cause for a minute, and then we'll move on to the solutions, right? So when it comes to the kind of problems that, let's say, what I generally, do when I'm reading. Okay, so you're given a passage, which is a long passage, as I mentioned. Let's say if I take the general versus the academic reading, okay, you will see that the academic reading has 3 long passages. Now, if I look at 3 long passages, I'm already like in my head, I'm like wondering, my God, I won't be able to do it. 3 long passages take a lot of time. I'm never able to sort of read and understand everything. There are a few things I would like you to understand when it comes to reading. Number one, you are not expected to be an expert on anything. So do not believe that you are expected to write a thesis on any passage. Please keep that to a side. You are not expected to be an expert. People come and say, you know what, I read this passage, it's on science and I'm not from the science background. So that's really not what should be stopping you, because they don't expect you to be a scientist to do that passage well. Right? Similarly, something on arts, something on specific topics that you're not an expert on, and you're expected to sort of do well on it, not that they expect you to be an expert. So when you read, do not expect yourself to have any prior knowledge on the topic, because they don't expect that from you. Okay? You simply are expected to read information as it's given to you in the simplest way possible, without having to get into the unnecessary details. You read, but you keep in mind that when you're reading, you do not make it complicated for yourself. Reading comes with this idea that I'm trying to comprehend or I'm trying to understand information one after the other. But multiple readings and panicking unnecessarily will not really make things easy for you anyway. So the idea is very simple. When you're reading, keep in mind that you're no expert. You're not expected to be an expert. And the other thing is that as you're reading, just try to get the general sense of the passage. Nowhere are you expected to get into unnecessary technical details, right? That I think should be the first thing you should know about reading per se. But do not expect reading to be something that's a difficult task, because suddenly you are expected to read things which are beyond your expertise. No one's expecting that from you. So relax, chill, you're all okay to go. Okay, so each and every one of you technically can do well on this section. It's just having the right mindset. So I think when it comes to reading, keep your mind focused on getting the general idea. That's about it. But do not get into unnecessary details or try to pressurize yourself unnecessarily. Okay, so that's another thing. But as you read, make sure you sort of do the other thing as well, which is try to get some keywords. As you're trying to sort of read passages, there are specific keywords that you find in the passage that you can also make a note of if you wish to. Now, going further, I mean, if I really encourage, if you guys have a notepad and a pen with you, please start making notes. Not that you have to write down everything on the screen. Of course, that's not what I expect from you, because I do not want this to be looking like I don't want, to have a cramming session here. You're not cramming anything. You're just trying to understand generally what happens, right? But just generally speaking, I think we would like to have some idea on what we are able to comprehend from this session. So start making notes. I strongly encourage you to make notes if you can. Okay, do that. And if of course, if you're making a note of anything and you want to have questions on it, you can of course ask me those questions right at the end. So I'll be able to answer those questions. Okay. So yeah, when it comes to understanding the passage and then moving on to the questions, as I said, there are keywords that we will focus on. Okay. So I think we would like to sort of understand how this works. Let me, before moving on to the techniques a little bit, sort of just tell you that there are specific things you have to be very careful about. Number one, as you're reading the passage, okay, make sure that you're able to follow the instructions that are also given to you in the question type. So, we'd like to sort of understand information given to us before we start answering the questions. Okay. So I hope that is okay with you guys so far. Can I get a quick yes if you guys are still there? I hope things are going well so far. In case you have if you're still wondering why haven't we really got to the point yet, I just wanted to set the background for you. The idea was to just tell you that, okay, this is what we are here for. But as we go further, I'm going to make you do a couple of exercises. Just make sure you're part of these exercises. Make sure you participate actively in these exercises. Make sure that you're answering as well whenever I ask you to answer those questions. Okay, so we'll try to do this together. I hope as a collaborative effort, we can just sort of work this out, and hopefully this becomes beneficial overall. Okay, so one of the question types that I told you that mostly is a problem on the reading section is one that deals with list of headings. Let's just simply understand it this way, that when you're given a passage, right, a passage has many paragraphs, correct? Now, as you have many paragraphs, you are expected to sort of understand what the paragraph means overall. Now, on the IELTS exam, one of the things they do is they sort of give you these paragraphs one after the other, and they expect you to sort of match a specific heading which sort of encompasses the meaning of the overall paragraph, or in simple words, they just expect you to sort of link the heading with the paragraph that sort of matches it, right? So you're basically matching the heading to a specific paragraph. The paragraph's overall meaning, please understand, the paragraph's overall meaning is what the list of headings should look like, right? So it basically is like a summary of it in a way, in short, in one line, or in like let's just simply call it a heading, but you're giving a title to a paragraph based on the overall sense of the paragraph. Right? So that's a basic idea behind what kind of question this is. I'm going to make you do a few questions. But remember, when you're doing this question, and as I always say, when it comes to any question type, focus on the instructions. The instructions are very important. Mostly people, directly get to the question and they hardly care about the instructions, but sometimes those instructions matter a lot. You miss out on understanding the instruction, you can struggle later on. So don't be that. Be smart, read the instructions well before you move on to the questions. I hope that that makes sense. Now, let's just move on to this task. Now, here's what I would like you guys to do. Okay, just make sure you're able to follow what I'm telling you to do. So what you see on the screen is the passage on the right. Okay, this is a specific paragraph of a passage. You see some list of headings that are given to us on the left. Okay, and we're going to do this together, by the way. We're going to do this particular task together. And once I'm done with this, I'm going to make you do a few more in which you will answer first, and then I'm going to come in as well after that. Okay, so let's do this together. Let's read this paragraph once, okay, and understand what this is trying to tell us. Please remember, when I'm doing this, I am trying to get the overall sense of this paragraph. I am nowhere trying to get into specific details. Keep this in mind, okay? Overall sense of the paragraph, not the specific details, okay? Once we do that, how we're going to match it with the headings is something I will come to, okay? So when I'm reading this, please try to follow me. So this is about the CT scanner. It says the computer tomography scanner of this, or the CT scanner, was initially designed to provide cross-sectional images of the brain. The word tomography is coined from two Greek words, tomos, meaning section, and graphia, meaning picture. Gottfried Hounsfield developed this technique in 1972 and was later recognized and awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in the field, in the medical field. Now, so far as you've read it, what does it generally tell me? It just gives me some idea that, okay, this seems to be about the CT scanner and when it was sort of invented and what's the meaning behind the whole idea of calling it tomography, or general idea about CT scanner so far, but telling us about how it was introduced per se. But let's just go further. Within 4 years of this development, CT scans, or call it CAT scans, which is further given to us as computed axial tomography, were reconstructed, allowing them to scan the entire body for evidence of tumors, injuries, and other abnormalities. Unlike an X-ray, which takes a single picture, a CT scanner sends multiple beams into an area and takes photographs from many different angles. So this overall, if I look at it, okay, just generally speaking, when I read this whole thing, what does it tell me? Let's understand this, and please remember, none of us, including me, none of us, okay, who are doing this right now are experts. I hope if some of you are experts at it, wonderful. At least I am not an expert on this, I can tell you for a fact. So I do not know much about CT scanners. I just know it's used in the medical field. I know it's done for scanning, but I'm not using my prior knowledge to understand this. This is just generally reading like a layperson. I'm someone who's very, very basic in trying to get this in a general sense. So in the general sense, what I see from this is that it talks about how CT scanner sort of, was introduced in some ways, or sort of tells me when it was invented or developed, and sort of what happened related to the CT scans in general, like how it was used in specific ways. But in general, I think what it talks about is CT scanner in a very general sense. Now, when it comes to the list of headings, as I said, we are trying to relate one heading with this entire general sense of this paragraph. Remember, I am not getting into specifics. This is about the overall sense of the paragraph. Now, the overall sense, I believe, is, okay, topic of the passage affect my confidence sometimes. How should I manage that? Yes. So coming to the particular question that you have, this, I believe you're asking about expertise. If I'm not wrong, you're trying to tell me that you're not an expert on it, but you're still it sort of affects you, right? So I think I just mentioned in a way that when you're doing a passage, okay, when you're expected to sort of, understand passages, right? Nowhere are you expected to be an expert. I think one of the things that I mentioned a while back. Now, as I read this, when I read this, I hope you were able to follow that when I'm reading this, I'm not an expert either. I'm just trying to get the general sense of it. Correct? So the same thing is expected of you. You are expected to read this just like a normal person would, but not as an expert. So first and foremost, getting affected by the topic in itself is not a right way to think, because if you do that, what it's going to do is it's going to make things anyway more difficult. Okay, so that's the idea. Let's just read it as random normal lay persons or lay people. Okay, very normal people who just are reading it for the first time. Anyway, now for the point that you are asking me if it affects you, let me just make this question easy for you now in this case. Okay, there are a list of headings you see on the left, okay, which has to match with the overall sense of this paragraph that you see on the right. Keep in mind, okay, that when I'm doing this, I have to match with the overall sense of the paragraph, which means that I can start eliminating choices which do not match with the overall sense of this paragraph. That's the simplest way to look at it. So instead of trying to look for what the perfect answer choice is, we also will start looking for which options are very, very specific, or which options are absolutely unrelated to the given paragraph. On the basis of these 2 points, if I can start eliminating choices, I might as well come down to maybe a choice or a couple of choices, and that can help me further. Okay. So when I read this paragraph, what does it overall tell me? It tells me about CT scan in general and how it was introduced in overall sense, what, made its existence come, it sort of tells us about its existence that came up in some ways, telling you how it sort of helps in general sense, but not very, very specific. Okay. So if I look at the first heading, it says brain and chest scan. Now, brain and chest scan, as you can understand, is not something that's discussed. If you look at the overall paragraph, nowhere does it really specifically say brain and chest scan. Or if I were to look at the overall sense also, I don't think it's talking about brain and chest scan. So I can remove that because it's not really going with the overall sense of the paragraph. Role of computers. Now, if I were to consider that this is related to computers also, but I do not anywhere in this paragraph see that this is about the role of computers in CT scan. So that can be a reason for me to eliminate role of computers. Invention of CT scan. Well, I can keep this option because it does talk about introducing CT scan in some ways, telling us how it came into existence. So that sort of gives me some idea. High cost. In the entire paragraph, show me if you see the word cost, or particularly if it talks about the expenses of using CT scan. I think if you look at the overall paragraph, it becomes pretty evident that that's not the case. So I can very easily eliminate the cost of CT scans. Then it says risks of using CT scan. Again, if you look at the overall paragraph, there is no specific detail about risks involved. So I believe risks again can become, something that I can remove on the basis of what's given to me. Emergency room care, you can see for yourself. The entire paragraph per se does not really anywhere, for that matter, talk about emergency room care. So I can remove that. Faster and more comfortable. Well, CT scanner is faster and more comfortable in the way it is used, probably not mentioned in the overall paragraph. So I can remove that again on the basis of what's covered overall, right? So, and then comes how doctors use CT scan. Here, the word how, generally speaking, the word how is mostly related to the process that is involved. So like where they would like to use it or in what way they would like to use it. Does this entire paragraph tell you how doctors use CT scan? Not exactly. So can I remove that? Yes, I can, because it's not telling me exactly about how it's used. Then it says how the patient is photographed. This again involves the process. Please remember the word how has got to sort of relate to the process involved. So it doesn't tell me how the entire process happens, like what happens at step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It doesn't tell me the process in any way. So I do not see patient is photographed and how that happens. Not talked about, so I can remove that. Enhancing scan images with dyes. Do you anywhere see dyes used? I can pretty easily say not something that's there, so I can easily remove that. What am I left with now in this case is invention of CT scans. Now, please remember when I did this, I was nowhere, okay, trying to look for the right answer so much. But of course, I wanted something to match. But at the same time, what I was ensuring was whatever I see is not mentioned or not related, or whatever is extremely specific, but not in the overall sense, can be removed. Now, with those two things in mind, I was able to eliminate choices one after the other. That, I believe, is the way you can work going forward. Remember, you are not expected to be an expert on this. I did this absolutely with a blank mind. I didn't have to think too much for this. It was just general sense and just generally relating with what's there and what's not there. Simple as that, right? We can move on to the next one. I'm going to give you a minute to do this particular one. Just very quickly, 1 minute, read this and then look at the options very quickly. Okay, yeah. So I think you've had a look at it now. If you read this one, it says physicians order CT scans for many reasons, including searching for tumors and assessing them. They can also check for cysts, kidney stones, and bone injuries. Bone injuries, it says, without CT scanners, surgeons would have to perform many needless and costly operations. Brain, chest, and abdominal CT scans are done commonly, though physicians also rely on the CT scanner to guide their needles while draining an abscess or performing a biopsy. Most emergency or shock treatment centers contain a CT scanner for assessing trauma victims. CT scans can find out internal bleeding both in brain and throughout the body. Just focusing on a few things here, if all of you are able to follow. CT scans, for many reasons, including this, they can also check for this. Without CT scanners, they would have to perform something. CT scanner is something they rely on to guide something. Most emergency shock treatments contain a CT scanner. CT scans can find out. If you look at all of this, one thing becomes very clear. They are talking about basically the use of CT scan in some way. I think you can understand that they're trying to use CT scan in some ways. Maybe that sort of gives you some idea of what exactly this is overall. So I believe if you look at it now, as you understand, it talks about how CT scans are used, like where they are used, and particularly when it says physicians, surgeons, I think it gives you some idea that it's related to doctors. So physicians and surgeons generally tells you it's about doctors, and the fact that they're being used for a specific purpose tells you the use of it. So brain and chest scan removed, role of computers does not talk about the use of it. Invention of CT scan is something we already saw in the previous one, so that's out anyway. High costs of CT scans, something about costs. Risks of using CT scans, use of CT scans, yes. Risks of it, nothing about the risk. It talks about particularly using CT scans by doctors and in general surgeons and physicians. So that's out. Emergency room care, not specific to emergency room care, so that goes out. Faster and more comfortable. Again, faster and comfortable. It talks about it being used by physicians and surgeons. Whether it's faster and comfortable, we don't, right? We can't really say. So I think that's not something that's being really talked about so much. I can remove that. How doctors use CT scan. Definitely talking about physicians, are talking about the surgeons, how they use CT scan, giving you some idea what CT scan does. Pretty much what you're looking for, does the job, but we can keep that on hold. How the patient is photographed, well, I think we can pretty much see that there's nothing about photograph. I mean, you know what it is, so we can pretty easily remove that. And then, of course, enhancing scanning images with dyes. Again, nothing specific to dyes, so I can remove that as well. Okay, I'll take up the questions a little later, please. So let's move on to the next question. Okay. So I hope that was clear. We did how doctors use CT scan, right? Let's move on to the next one. Again, it's just paragraph. You have a minute, go through that, and then we look at the list of headings. Okay, all right. I believe you've got time to read this one. Let's just understand how this works. So let me just read this very quickly. In most cases, a patient should be given a contrast material before undergoing a CT scan. During the dynamic CT scanning, iodine dye is either injected into the blood or added to a drink that the patient must consume approximately 45 minutes before entering the scanner. The liquid X-ray dye makes it easier for the scanner to see the organs and blood vessels when the pictures are produced. If I read so far, one thing I've become very clear about is it talks about how this dye is used or the dye is used for a specific purpose. We're able to understand what that purpose is. We'll read further. This contrast material is used mostly for chest and pelvic scans, whereas oral contrast material is used for abdominal scans. Again, telling you how this material is used in different ways. In some cases, physicians need the pictures to be taken before and after the contrast material enters the patient's body. Patients who take the contrast material in the arm often report a warm sensation. In rare cases, an allergic reaction occurs. Patient can suffer water loss when contrast material is injected. So it is avoided when scanning patients who suffer from kidney failure. So overall, if I read, I think what it tells me is that for sure, there is something about the dye being used for someone who wants to get a CT scan done. So particularly the patient who's going into the scanner has to have this dye, or maybe use this dye to be able to do the job. So they actually are telling us about the dye connected to the CT scanner in some way. It definitely connects these two things. If I start eliminating choices, I think it becomes relatively easy for you. Brain and chest scan, definitely not something you could see. Role of computers, no. Invention of CT scans already over, so that's gone. High costs, nothing specific about costs. Risks, well, we can keep this option about risks for now, because some of you might have seen the part in the end where it says allergic reaction and about kidney failure. So we'll come to this option, keep this on hold for a minute. Then it says emergency room care, definitely not specific about emergency room care in this entire paragraph. Faster and more comfortable, not really, talks about the dye. It talks about how doctors use CT scan. Again, this option is already used, so it's gone. How the patient is photographed. How the patient is photographed. You can probably say that, they're using the patient's, like they're sort of telling the patient to, consume this dye in some way, and then they are scanning the person. Yes, but how is the patient photographed? Particularly not something that's focused on. Enhancing scan images with dyes. Now, keeping in mind that it does tell us how enhancing, if you can see, it talks about specific parts where it says how the dye is sort of injected into the body, how this dye makes it easier for the scanner to see the organs. So definitely telling you that the dye helps in scanning better to some extent, right? So it's definitely relating those two things. Now, if you were to compare those two options, the risks involved versus the enhancing scanning images with dyes, if you compare these two, which one is more predominantly talked about? Which one is more, more predominant in a sense? What is a major part of this paragraph? If you were to look at it, I think majority of it, what it's trying to tell you is the dye is somewhere connected to the CT scanner. Overall, it helps in scanning. Yes, it does talk a little bit about, in some cases, it has that allergic reaction. But if I were to look at the overall paragraph, it's not about the risk so much. It's more about the fact that the dye is helping in scanning better. So to some extent, I think that becomes very clear to us. I can remove the risks of using the CT scan option out. I think that can be removed. What you're left with now is enhancing scan images with dyes. So I think that becomes very clear to you. I hope you were able to get this. Moving on to the next paragraph. Again, very quickly, you have a minute. If you can go through this real quick, then we can move on to the next one. I believe you had a look at it, and I think a few things became very clear to all of you. I would like you guys to focus on it. I think when you started off, when you read this paragraph, it says the danger of radiation exposure caused by X-ray beams is generally considered minimal, as in less, compared to the benefits that a CT scan can provide. So that tells me that maybe X-ray is a little less risky compared to the CT scan. In many cases, especially in the detection of tumors and internal bleeding, CT scans can provide information that can save a person's life, which is good, but full body scanning, which is saved for serious conditions such as coronary artery disease, remains a controversial procedure as prolonged exposure to radiation is linked to cancer, telling you how this can become a bit of a problem, right? So that I think tells you a little bit there. Pregnant women are excluded from receiving CT scan. I think that part where it says pregnant women are excluded, removed from receiving CT scans, clearly telling you it's not good for them. So clearly, if pregnant women are going to receive that, then there is going to be some problems. So obviously not recommended, right? So that's telling you something about the fact that it's a problem if you use it for too long. When pregnant women require an evaluation, most physicians favor using other procedures such as ultrasound and or MRI, telling you that there are alternatives people look for. But overall, if you look at it, it talks about the fact that there are problems if I use the CT scan. If I now come down to the list of headings, I think you were able to understand that brain and chest scan is not something you'd like to look at in this case. Obviously, it's talking about the problems of CT scan to some extent, or the risks involved as we see. Role of computers goes out, invention of CT scans already out. High cost, nothing about cost, so that goes out. Risks of using the CT scan, definitely the predominant idea. Overall, majority of it talks about the problems that one might face if they use the CT scan. Emergency room care, not there. Faster and more comfortable, not there. How doctors use CT scan, well, we've removed that already. How the patient is photographed, again, not something you see overall. It talks about the problems. And so enhancing scanning images or scan images with dyes, we already used that. All you're left with now is the risks of using the CT scan, which is what they talk about overall. Overall, you see there are problems. You see it very clearly. Now, believe me, in all these questions that we've done so far, nowhere, okay, did we have to work too hard to understand the unnecessary technical details. Like if you ask me, I'll be very blunt and honest to you. When it says coronary artery disease, I could just barely understand, like arteries may be heart. Coronary may be something, I don't know. Like if I were to understand the technical details in it, people end up reading the same thing over and over again. They think that there's something to get out of it. No. If I were to get the general sense, if I were to see the words here, it talks about how CT scan can be a little problematic because it talks about, as we see, it talks about in comparison with X-ray, where it's generally considered minimal compared to the benefits that CT scan can provide, which means somewhere the CT scan provides better benefits. But at the same time, going further, it talks about in cases where it's, they've talked about how it has become controversial, exposure to it is harmful, all of that. I mean, generally speaking, overall, while they do acknowledge that CT scan has its benefits, it does sort of become very clear later that CT scan can become a bit of a problem. So overall, if I look at it, it does highlight the fact that there are problems with it. Like you just cannot say, yeah, it's all right. It's not all rosy with CT scan. It's not all rosy. Let's call it that. So it's not all rosy. There are problems, and it talks about the risks that way. So honestly, there's no rocket science here, guys. I think all of us, okay, have it in us to do this. I am an absolute no expert on CT scan. I was able to pull this off. I think pretty much what you guys can do as well when you do it. Just focus on some of the key things. They will see, like excluding, sometimes the pregnant women are excluded. Sometimes it talks about the fact that, that it's kind of causing some harm to someone. There are things, it talks about controversial procedure, radiation is linked to cancer. There are points which tell us something about the overall idea. But if I focus on those things, I do not have to worry about the technical details. You get into technical details, it is going to become a problem for you. No one's an expert. Relax, read it as a layperson. Mark my words, you're going to fly high and do really well. You're going to fly, like soar, high, not fly high, you'll soar high. You'll get a very, very good score if you just focus on the right things. Now, coming to another point here, let's just simply relate with the 4 questions that we've solved so far. This was the 4th question we've done. In these 4 questions, if I were to look at the overall idea, 2 things that become very clear to me. Number 1, I am trying to relate words which, let's just simply say, are synonyms. So if I were to look at something that's overall idea, I'm trying to relate that with a synonym of it in the list of headings. So it's like getting the overall idea, yes, but there are synonymous elements that I am trying to relate it with. So that's one thing. And then of course information is going to be paraphrased, but overall speak, if I look at the reading section, it's not something that expects you to be an expert. You merely need to be able to understand what are the synonyms and what is the paraphrasing. If you get these two things and get the general sense of the passage, nowhere is technical expertise required. I'm pretty sure that after the first question, the next three questions, most of you were able to get it right. I do not think it was a major challenge. So I think in general, you'll make this a habit and it's going to become easier for you going forward. Okay, so that's that. Now moving to the next question type, which is, I believe I've told you, is another challenging question type, which is true, false, and not given. Now, if I ask you what is true and what is false and what is not given, based on the information provided to you, you can say that, yeah, it's this information tells me something is true. This information tells me that it's not true. This information tells me it's not given. Point here is that you're given a paragraph or basically a passage, and then you are given some statements. Now, these statements that you're given, okay, are either true according to the passage, or they are false according to the passage, or they're not given according to the passage. Sometimes, okay, I think true is something most people are able to get more often than not. When it comes to false and not given, there is a bit of a challenge. There is a bit of a doubt in people's minds because they think, should this be false? Should this be not given? Maybe this is not given. Maybe this is false. Dilemma, confusion. Not a big deal. It can always, cause trouble, and it's absolutely okay. Even the best of people have these problems. But let's just keep that to a side and for a minute, okay, just think about what is it that you're expected to do. Just a couple of minutes back, I mentioned two things, synonyms and paraphrasing. Keep in mind that information and the questions, let's just come to this point that the information given to you, the passage, and the questions which are given to you are mostly in the order in which the passage is written. So if the passage moves from A to B, B to C, questions are also given to you as A followed by B followed by C. So the questions follow the same order as the order in which the passage is written. Basically, they are both in sync. So that's one thing. Second, synonyms and paraphrasing. Believe me, it is all about trying to find synonyms and paraphrasing. Same thing that's given to you in the passage has to be given in the statement. If it's given the same way, as in information matches, maybe the wording is different, but if the information matches, I can still consider it as true. On the other hand, if there is information in the passage which says something, but the information in the statement is bang opposite to that, I can consider that as false. But then if there is information in the passage and the statement talks about something which the passage does not tell me about whatsoever, it becomes not given. So simply, if it's the same as what's in the passage, it's true. It's same idea, synonyms or call it paraphrasing. If they sort of match in sense, the sense matches, keep it. If it doesn't, it's false. And if it's not in the passage at all, it's not given. So the idea is very simple. Keep your mind very clear about what the passage is, and then the information accordingly can be matched. If it's true, keep it. False, not given accordingly. Okay, so we'll do a task now. Let's move to the next slide. So I hope all of you can see this passage on the right. And there is, so there are some instructions, but I would like you guys to first focus on the passage which is given to you on the right. Very quickly go through this passage real quick. We have to make sure we finish this really quick. So go through this real quick, please. All right. Now, I hope you've read this passage. I hope you understand what this is trying to say overall. Remember, just remind ourselves something that we discussed a while back. You do not have any idea about this person. If you know about her, wonderful. Even if you don't know about her, it's absolutely okay. All right. So basically, we are reading about this for the first time, and that's how you got to react to it. Okay. So what it tells me is that Marie Curie is someone who's probably the most famous woman scientist who's ever lived. Born Maria Sklodowska. I'm not very good with these Russian pronunciations, but okay. So yeah, that's I think Polish pronunciation, not very good at it, but okay. She's famous for her work in radioactivity and was twice a winner of the Nobel Prize. General information that she did that with her husband, Pierre Curie and Henri Becquerel, I believe, if that's what it is. She was awarded the 1903 Nobel Prize for Physics and was then the sole winner of the 1911 Nobel Prize for Chemistry. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. From childhood, Mary was remarkable for her prodigious memory, and at the age of 16 won a gold medal for the completion of her secondary education. Because her father lost her savings through bad investment, she had then had to work as a teacher. From her earnings, she was able to finance her sister Bronia's medical studies in Paris, on the understanding that Bronia would in turn later help her to get an education. In 1891, this promise is fulfilled. Mary went to Paris and began to study at the Sorbonne, the University of Paris, that is. She often worked far into the night, lived on little more than bread and butter and tea. She came first in the examination in the physical sciences in 1893, and in 1894 was placed second in the examination in mathematical sciences. It was not until the spring of that year that she was introduced to Pierre Curie. So when I read this, okay, all I know for a fact is this is about some woman, okay, who's a famous scientist. She's won the Nobel Prize for physics and chemistry. Okay, fine. And it just tells me about how she, was from a family where they had to struggle, just generally speaking. Her father lost savings and something came into existence, and it's a happy go story eventually. It's all right. Okay. At the end of the day, generally speaking, that's what I get to know. Now, am I an expert on Marie Curie? Not at all. I just know that she's someone who's famous, probably even if I wouldn't know, at least I've got to know what she is, but in general, not specifically. Correct. Now, coming to this question, you see, it says questions 1, 2, 3. We're looking at question 1 over here. Do the following statements agree with the information given in the reading passage? We've read the passage. We understand generally what it is about Marie Curie. Now, there are 3 things we look at. True, if the information that you have, the statement that is given to you, if it agrees with the information in the passage, then it's true. If it's false, it's the information that contradicts. Please understand the word contradicts basically is opposite of what's mentioned in the passage. We'll see that as well. And C says not given if there is no information on this. That is basically the statement is something that's beyond what is given to me in the passage. All right, could be beyond. We don't know. Right. So we'll come to that. Okay. Now look at the first statement. It says Marie Curie's husband was a joint winner of both Marie's Nobel Prizes. Remember, for heaven's sake, read the statement carefully. You miss out on reading statements. You miss out on reading statements properly or carefully. Chances are you're going to get things wrong more often than not. Okay. So I think we can work on this, right? It says Marie Curie's husband was a joint winner of both Marie's Nobel Prizes. So let's first understand where is the Nobel Prize mentioned. So if I start reading it here, it says Marie Sklodowska in Poland in 1867. She's famous for her work on the radioactivity and was twice a winner of the Nobel Prize. So one thing's become very clear, she's won the Nobel Prize twice, just 2 times. With her husband, that's once, with her husband, Pierre Curie and Henri Becquerel, she was awarded the 1903 Nobel Prize for Physics. Now, what that tells me is that she's won this in combination with Pierre Curie and Henri Becquerel. So 3 people together won the Nobel Prize for Physics. So that she definitely won with her husband. Yes. So was that a joint winner? Yes. For physics? Yes. But if I read further, and was then sole winner. The word sole, S-O-L-E, talks about her as an individual, not with somebody. So sole winner of the 1911 Nobel Prize for Chemistry, simply telling me that when it comes to the chemistry, the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, She was not someone who got it with somebody, but she won it alone on her own. So basically, was this a joint prize, or was it something that happened in both cases? She won 2 Nobel Prizes. One was for physics, one was for chemistry. She did win the physics prize with her husband, but for chemistry, she won it on her own. So was it a joint winner for both Nobel Prizes? Not really. For one, it was a joint one. For the other, it was not. So I can simply say that this information is contradicting what is mentioned there. It's saying that she won chemistry Nobel Prize on her own, but joined with her husband for physics, clearly telling me that there is a contradiction in information. So should this be false, or should this be true, or should this be not given? Very simply, because this is contradicting information provided, this is false, right? But if I look at the next one, it says Mary became interested in science when she was a child. Now, coming to the word child, when she was a child, let's read here. It says that she was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize from childhood. That's when she was a child. Mary was remarkable for her prodigious memory, and at the age of 16 won a gold medal on completion of a secondary education. That's the information I have. It particularly talks about when she was a child, she was remarkable with her memory. Wonderful. Her memory was great. And then it further says that, she even won a gold medal for completing a secondary education. Even better. Fine. If I read it over there, where does it say that she became interested in science when she was a child? Interested in science particularly. Memory, having a wonderful memory on its own does not tell me that she was interested in science. Further, it tells me about secondary education for which she got the gold medal. Fantastic. But telling me her achievement at the age of 16. But does it particularly tell me that at that age she was influenced by science? Sorry, going too far. Going too far simply means I don't know. Maybe she was interested in science, not given to me, out. Simply, this information now, is it false or is it not given? That could be the challenge here. Well, simply speaking, maybe she was interested in science when she was a child, but it's not given to me, because all it talks about is that when she was a child, she had a fantastic memory, but nothing specific about science that she was interested in. So is this given to me? Not really. So is this false or not given? Simply, it's not given, because she might have been interested in science when she was a child, but it's not given to me because it's not there. So that goes as not given for me, not false. Keep in mind, it's not contradicting. It's something that could be true, may have been there, may not have been there, but I don't know. Right? Yeah, and then coming to the third question, okay, very quickly, it talks about Mary was able to attend the Sorbonne because of her sister's financial contribution. Okay, well, speaking about her earnings, just coming to this part, when it says because her father lost savings through bad investment, she then had to work as a teacher. From her earnings, she was able to finance her sister's medical studies, on the understanding that Bronia's medical study, that Bronia would in turn later help her to get an education. So it does tell me that she did help her sister, but in turn, she wanted her sister to help her in her education. If I go further, it says that in 1891, this promise, the word this is referring to the previous part. The promise is the fact that her sister is going to help her in return for her education. So going further, it says later help her in her education, right? Basically saying that she went on to study in Paris, at the University of Paris. So clearly, is this information given to me? As it says, Mary was able to attend Sorbonne, which is University of Paris, because of her sister's financial contribution. Yes, it says that she did fulfill the promise in a way, returning her help. So definitely this information is true according to what's mentioned in the passage. So all in all, I think if I overall sort of sum this up very quickly, so I think all in all, what we've understood is that when it comes to reading, I was not someone who was an expert. I don't have to be an expert. Simply speaking, I was able to just match those synonyms, paraphrasing statements written the same way or in a different way, but trying to mean the same. Overall, synonyms and paraphrasing is what I can focus on, but keeping in mind that nowhere was I trying to behave like an expert. Nowhere was I trying to bring in my knowledge on something, because not trying to include my knowledge onto anything. So if I keep that in mind, I think reading passages, particularly the two question types which I discussed with you so far, are some of the toughest questions on the IELTS reading section. If I was able to make you understand a couple of things, if not a lot, I think what you must have taken from this session so far is that nowhere is the difficulty of the question really hampering you if you keep things simple. Keeping simple here also means that when you're reading a passage, please breathe. Believe me, breathing helps. If I'm reading a passage, all I can do is just close my eyes, breathe, and inhale and exhale for probably 10 seconds, but do that. If you do that, probably a little bit more composed. When you're composed, you read, but not with the intention of panicking or not with the intention of trying to gather everything, but just getting a general sense of it. The general sense of it, and with the information provided, it's a simple matching game that you're playing. But when you match, it's all there. But remember, to match, you can also eliminate. To match, you can also keep in mind that what's there and what's not there. Just keep your eyes and mind wide open, but it's not something that's rocket science whatsoever. IELTS reading is totally in your reach. I can tell you that for a fact. Now, coming to the fact, what are we going to do at ACC? So here, basically, at ACC, we are making sure that we prepare you thoroughly for the IELTS exam. So our focus overall has always been on making you understand some of the strategies of each question type. So I discussed two question types with you with specific strategies. Also, we make sure that we give you a bank of 1,500 odd questions overall on our online platform, which helps you prepare thoroughly. In a way, it helps you sort of gives you a pool of many questions that you can prepare from. So that helps. And then, of course, you have a lot of sample answers, vocabulary required to do well on the exam, whether it's on the writing or speaking. In every case, we are trying to help you on every single aspect of IELTS exam. What I just did was a simple, unit of the whole thing. I couldn't have covered, to be honest. I've still gone beyond the time, but I hope some of you stayed so far. I hope you were able to understand a few things. But our focus overall on preparing students for the IELTS exam is to give them every single possible assistance when it comes to the exam overall. But keep in mind, it's all about understanding the strengths and the weaknesses, working on the weaknesses, getting those right, working on your strengths and making sure you're not losing your strengths at any point. Overall, you have to have a comprehensive preparation. And I think when it comes to us, we are doing that. Also keep in mind, if you would like to get your basic English sorted, in a way, if you believe that your basic English is sort of not that great so far, or you think that your basic English needs to be something you'd like to polish, we have things for that as well. We have designed things in such a way that when you come in, your specific purposes can be met. Every time you come here and say you want to prepare for IELTS, but you have some other concerns related to IELTS, we'll be able to address those as well. Every single thing, okay? And yeah, but last but not the least, I'm going to take some questions. But before you ask me questions, if you are following me right now on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe on our channel. Make sure you hit the like button as well if you've liked whatever I've done so far. Making sure that, I really wish I had a lot of time, but I do not have that. But I can go on and on with discussing things with you. I really love discussing things when it comes to something that's giving you some idea about things that you're not very sure about. And I think at the end of the day, we all like to learn. We all would like to sort of make ourselves better at what we're doing. So I hope I was able to give you some insights. So that's about it for today. Of course, if you are on Facebook Live, you can also, join our group or IACC India. You can join that. And yes, I am now open to questions. Any questions specifically, I'll be more than happy to answer. Okay, I have a lot of questions here. Yashika says, I solve the question first and then I'll transfer the answers in my answer sheet. But could I manage time? What should I do? I think one of the questions that people generally ask me is how do I manage transferring the answers to the answer sheet? I think when you start solving questions, you are so stuck in answering those questions, you do not realize that you have to transfer the answers to the answer sheet, especially if you're doing the paper-based exam. So I think what you can do is with every question that you solve, just immediately start marking the answers as well. I think it works that way, right? But keep in mind, this has to happen simultaneously. But if you just keep solving all the questions and you want to fill the answer sheets right at the end, maybe you will not have enough time. Now, if you don't have enough time right at the end, even if you've answered those questions, because you've not filled the answer sheet, you're very unlikely to get marks. So of course, I think you would start marking the answers on the answer sheet simultaneously. So another question I have here is, sometimes I feel two answers are correct for a question. How do I figure that out? Well, simple. I think I was able to help you understand how elimination works. I mean, we can go on and on with this discussion some other day. But generally speaking, I think when you have two answer choices, never look for which one is 100% right. Maybe you want to understand that, okay, one of these two is closer, but which one is a little, I would say, something slightly wrong with one of the two. Looking for faults is a natural thing that we humans have in us. I think finding faults is something that we are very good at, generally speaking. I mean, let's not shy away from this fact. We are all very good at finding faults. So maybe finding faults is something that you can, look at. If you're stuck between two choices, look for one that has a little bit more, one of them is a little bit more faulty than the other. You can start eliminating accordingly. Reading books for practice before IELTS exam will help. Well, yes, it does. You can read a lot of good sources. There are a lot of sources, newspapers, books, like novels or anything that you wish to read. But remember, reading per se might help you. In general, it just helps you build a reading habit, but that comes with a lot of reading. It won't happen overnight. That's number one. Number two, please do not read with the intention of becoming an expert on any subject. Get this very clear. You're reading only in order to build this habit of reading more often. Suddenly, if you're given this idea of, okay, you know what, this is a passage, read it. I'm like, okay, why do I read it? Like, of course, I'm not interested in the topic. Like, we read something about CT scan. Probably not something I'm interested in, but I had to because it's the exam. But nowhere I was expected to be an expert at it. So when I'm reading something, I'm only reading with a general sense of it, to get the general idea of it. So nowhere are you expected to be an expert and then read it. No. So when you're reading or making reading a habit, make it a habit because you'd like to just generally read, but not anything else. Okay. Sometimes I get stuck with the vocabulary in these sessions. Yeah. So I think, yes. So I think when it comes to vocabulary, I think, vocabulary overall improves with the list of vocabulary that you have to learn on daily basis. We do provide a list of vocabulary to you when you're preparing for your IELTS exam. So one thing we can do is help you prepare for a specific kind of vocabulary, but do not expect yourself to understand everything, right? Sometimes we have to be smart. Sometimes, when we were doing those questions, a lot of those questions had tough words. Like, not everything was easy, but I was trying to get the general sense of it, right? So I think I was able to look at, okay, yeah, this one's there, but I'm not 100% sure about it. So maybe I'll look for something else. So you have to build a vocabulary, yes, but at the same time, if you find that there are specific things that you're not sure about, you can always, maybe work on it. But if there is something that's really pestering you to the core, like, I'm not getting this at all, I'm still going behind the life of it, then you're making a mistake. Be smart. If there's not one way, there has to be some other way. You can always find that. We can have those hacks in place. We'll talk about the hacks probably in the sessions some other time soon. And there is Tia who's asked me, Tia, are you still there? I think she's not there. Whatever. Yeah, so I believe, so I think the idea was about how to be good in true false part of reading. Well, I think I was able to answer this to a certain extent. I said when it comes to true or false, basically it's about matching information. But that matching happens when you keep in mind that the matching is not an exact copy of what's in the passage. Basically, the idea is that if something's in the passage, you try to look for a paraphrase of it or a synonym of it. But if you see something's bang opposite to that, it becomes a false, something I was able to do during the exercise. But yeah, keep in mind that true, false, not given are the kind of questions where just a bit of careful reading is required. First, the location that you find in the passage. Second, matching that location with the information provided to you. And I think what you have to do is carefully understand that there is a slight difference between true and false. True in a sense, exact, same thing said in other words, probably. But the second thing for sure is about contradiction. If you see a bang opposite thing, like we saw about the Nobel Prize, there was something that was false. We saw why it was false, because it was actually going against the information provided to me, right? So I think it's all about just matching that smartly. Just a slight, careful reading could do the job for you, but I think that's about it. So I think I was able to answer most of the questions that I have. I don't have any more questions, to be honest, but anyway, thank you so much, all of you, for being so patient. I've crossed 15 minutes. I don't think that's a good idea, but anyway, I think all that matters to me at the end of the day is you guys got what I wanted to convey, I hope. For more questions, you can always reach out to me. So if you want to note down, I am going to put it on the chat box. If you sort of wish to sort of connect with me, it's rohan.lakhne@aeccglobal.com. You can connect with me on my mail. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. And yeah, that's about it. So if you have received it, I hope it's rohan.lakhne, rohan.lakhne@aeccglobal.com. Please reach out to me for any queries regarding your IELTS preparation. I'll be more than happy to assist. Thank you so much. It was wonderful being a part of the session. I hope you were able to get things out of this. I hope I was boring. I hope I was not dragging things unnecessarily. I really know that I've dragged a little bit, but anyway. So thank you for staying patient. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Ciao. See you soon with some new sessions that we planned for you. Thank you so much.